The plight of the Gaza Strip is becoming even more dire as the war enters its 11th week, with a communications blackout and spiraling hunger adding insult to injury. In the besieged Gaza Strip, where a UN agency reported a dramatic increase in hunger levels in recent days, the situation was further exacerbated on Saturday by a protracted communications blackout that cut off telephone and internet connections. Aid deliveries and rescue efforts were impeded as the Israeli war against Hamas, the ruling militant group in Gaza, entered its 11th week, as internet and telephone lines went down on Thursday evening and remained inaccessible on Saturday morning. According to internet access advocacy group netblocks.org, according to Alp Toker, the director of the organization, the internet blackout is ongoing, and based on our records it is the longest such incident during the more than 2-month war. Damage to telecommunications lines in the south has severely disrupted communications with Gaza, according to the UN's Humanitarian Affairs Department. The offensive, which began in response to the historic attack on Israel by Hamas on October 7, has devastated a large portion of northern Gaza and forcibly displaced 85% of the 2.3 million people living there. A humanitarian catastrophe is rapidly worsening, and displaced people are cramming into shelters, mostly in the south. Hamas militants attacked Israel on October 7, killing over 1,200 people, mostly civilians, and holding over 240 others hostage. Israeli forces were involved in heavy fighting with Hamas militants in the Shijaya area of Gaza City in recent days when 3 Israeli hostages were mistakenly shot and killed on Friday. According to Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, the Army's chief spokesperson, the soldiers mistakenly saw the 3 Israelis as a threat and began firing. In a spontaneous demonstration demanding the return of the hostages, hundreds of protesters blocked Tel Aviv's main highway late Friday. Ever since the attack on October 7, the Israeli public has been captivated by the situation of the hostages. A strong public campaign spearheaded by their families has demanded that the government do more to repatriate them. Anger over the 3 men's accidental deaths is likely to put more pressure on the government to resume negotiations with Hamas, mediated by Qatar, to exchange more prisoners for Palestinians held in Israeli prisons. The victims were all young men in their 20s. During the month of November, Hamas exchanged 100 hostages for Palestinian prisoners. Women and minors made up the vast majority of the freed people on both sides. Since Hamas wants more veteran prisoners released in exchange for the female soldiers it is holding, negotiations on additional swaps broke down. Israeli political and military officials frequently state that, alongside destroying Hamas, their primary objective in the war is the release of all hostages. Their claim, however, that military pressure on Hamas is necessary to secure their release, has caused public opinion to split sharply. Hamas has stated that it will only release the remaining hostages, an estimated 130 in all, if Israel terminates the war and releases all Palestinian prisoners, following the breakdown of negotiations. Nearly 7,000 Palestinians, including hundreds apprehended since the conflict began, were detained by Israel as of the end of November on charges of security offenses. Those residing in the urban refugee camp of Jabalia and the devastated city of Gaza in northern Gaza reported hearing gun battles and heavy bombing throughout the night and into Saturday. The Shijaya neighborhood resident Assad Abu Taha described the bombardment as violent and said that communication was difficult due to telecommunications outages. "We have no idea what's going on." Another local, Hamza Abu Siada, said that Jabalia was experiencing heavy airstrikes and constant gunfire and explosions. Overnight, a journalist from the Associated Press in southern Gaza also reported that the cities of Rafah and Khan Yunis were hit by airstrikes and tank shelling. Over the course of just 2 weeks, the number of displaced households suffering from severe hunger increased from 38% to 56%, according to the UN's World Food Programme. This is due to the fact that aid can only enter Gaza at a trickle and distribution has been disrupted by the fighting. According to the World Food Programme, households are expected to face a catastrophic situation in the northern region because aid cannot reach there. Prior to the communications blackout, the health ministry in Gaza, which is run by Hamas, announced Thursday that more than 18,700 Palestinians had been killed in the offensive. Thousands more are presumed dead or missing under the debris. Deaths in battle are not treated differently by the ministry. While the most recent tally did not break out the proportion of female and juvenile casualties, these groups have historically accounted for close to two-thirds of the total. In the southern city of Khan Yunis, 2 Palestinian journalists working for the Al Jazeera television network were killed and wounded on Friday in an Israeli strike. A second drone strike occurred while the two were reporting from a school that had previously been struck by an airstrike, according to the network. According to the Qatari network, dozens of mourners gathered outside Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis to pray for Samar Abu Daka's funeral. The 64th journalist killed since the conflict erupted was the cameraman, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists. In addition, there were 3 Lebanese, 4 Israelis, and 57 Palestinians. The southern city of Khan Yunis has been the focal point of Israel's ground offensive.